Morning, everybody. We'll give this just a minute for folks to join in. I know that what I'm seeing on my controls is not what you're seeing, but I'll give you more information than you ever wanted. Whenever I start this thing, it tells me I've been live for a minute, which is inaccurate, I feel like. We'll give people a chance to join in with us. And then I'll fix my hair like 30 times because I'm on camera, which is unfixable at this point. So good morning, Foundry family. Glad to have you with us. This morning we've got a chance to talk about the role of organizing and advocacy and charity and the difference between them, as well as some direct steps that we can be taking as a community as it relates to justice work here in the city and around our region. So this morning we'll have with us Reverend Allison Almaguer of the Washington Interfaith Network, so that we have a chance to talk together. And this will all be, we're going to push you this entire time to make sure that you have signed up for the July 2nd virtual action with WIN, and we'll be dropping the registration link into the comments so that you can make sure that you have signed up. But I'm putting the info on the screen for you now. We'll bring Allison in. She gets a tiny little countdown, and then she's with us. Good morning, Allison.
Good morning. Hi, Pastor Ben, and hi, Foundry family.
So, Allison, thanks a lot for joining us, because this was a little bit last minute, but I'm very appreciative to you making some moves with the schedule to get in here with us. And I just want to start by, could you introduce yourself again to the Foundry group? You've been around with us for so long at this point. I hope that people are getting to know you, but I know that we've only really hit some pockets. So please just tell us a bit about yourself and your role with WIN.
Absolutely. Thanks. So my name again is Reverend Allison Almaguer, and I'm a senior organizer with the Washington Interfaith Network. This has been my 5th year with WIN. I'm ordained in the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, so a progressive Baptist tradition. But for all you hardcore Methodists out there, I was trained at Duke Divinity, so degree Master of Divinity from there, and love my Methodist brothers and sisters. So my background after Duke was working interfaith chaplaincy and also working at Church of the Savior in DC before coming to organizing. And from the work of doing direct service, found it really important, but really kept recognizing that I felt called to go to the deeper systems and systemic roots of a lot of the issues that I was seeing, working in homeless shelters or working with women who were returning from prison in the hospital as well. And ended up, coming to organizing to be able to find a place to merge my faith and merge my passion for policy and politics. So here I am, and that's a bit how I got here.
Well, thanks for appreciate that. It's always, I feel like we have to do this like all the time. We got to reintroduce, reaccredit every single time, but
and I can introduce WIN if that's helpful too for some.
And we should, and I think, and let's talk about what that is. I mean, sometimes I'm very brand loyal myself, almost to a fault. But I don't want to act like WIN is the only place that we do organizing work, but WIN is like the main place that we as the Foundry community, as one whole community, do some of our organizing work. So tell us about what is the Washington Interfaith Network?
Yeah, absolutely. So WIN is a part of something called the Industrial Areas Foundation, IAF. So we're actually a national grassroots organization that's been around since the 1940s. So we have started in DC in 1996, and we're a broad-based citizens organization, which means that we intentionally organize people of different economic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, and also faith traditions. So within WIN, we have 40 different organizations in all 8 wards. That consists of our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Christian brothers and sisters, and also our Muslim brothers and sisters, and also unions and people of non-faith. because we believe that the broader we are and the more diverse we are, the more power we have together. And when we say power, we mean people power, relational power that's developed through relationship and in communities of accountability, where we trust one another and work together to be able to bend that moral arc a bit towards justice. So, in WIN's 25-year history, we've worked on numerous different issues because, along with being broad based, it means we're multi issue. So, we're not an advocacy organization that just focuses on one thing, although that has its importance, but we work on a variety of issues, really, whatever comes from the people we're listening to. So, over the past 5 years, we've worked on housing, we've worked on immigration, and we've worked on jobs with the circulator, which many of our Foundry members were engaged in that fight as well, and all along with DC General and homelessness fight as well. And we are deeply grateful to the work that Foundry put in around those campaigns. So that's a bit of background about WIN. Again, we are nonpartisan, so we do not support any politicians. We like to say we have no permanent enemies and no permanent allies, only permanent issues. So we do have permanent issues, which are around getting to the systemic causes of racial and economic injustice in our city. And we believe that in order to change any of that, we have to have the people power to help hold our elected officials accountable and hold ourselves accountable to be able to move our city in the right direction.
Yeah, always important to say, like as an organization, of course, not partisan, and then biblical as well. No permanent friends, no permanent allies. Wrestle not with flesh and blood.
There you go.
We struggle against injustice. We struggle against in whatever forms, is how the Methodists say, in whatever forms they present themselves, we will fight injustice. So doesn't matter who's in the seat of power. If the seat of power is not using that power for the good of the people, and especially the most vulnerable people, it's not good enough. So that's where we're at. I really appreciate, or it seems to me that WIN's not necessarily unique within the IAF network, I suppose, but it is WIN is particularly rooted within the faith communities of DC, helping get launched off with some of the Methodist churches, especially Emory Fellowship United Methodist up on Georgia, in the northern part of the city with Dr. Joe Daniels when the group got started. But IAF affiliates, even here in the region, like in Northern Virginia and in Montgomery County, also exist, but are a little more of a broad starting base, I suppose, might be one way to say it. Can we talk real quick about how does organizing kind of fit in with this idea of advocacy? When we talk about doing organizing with WIN, we're talking about getting our message from the most affected groups and centering those voices in the fight. I think sometimes in advocacy we tend to do some things on behalf, kind of like client advocacy a little bit, not quite in the lawyeristic form, but tell us about kind of the base of how we do organizing and what that kind of cycle looks like, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can start with the basics of the theory of change that we like to teach. That's really simple, is that there are numerous ways to create change. The three that we often think about the most is charity, our charity, advocacy, and organizing. So charity meaning, doing direct service, which I think are, incredibly important services, issues that the church and the scriptures call us to do. So providing food, providing sandwiches, providing backpacks for kids who need them. People need shoes and food immediately. So it's that immediate effect, direct service. And then there's advocacy. Advocacy, is an incredibly important role as well. I think of something like the ID ministry, where you guys do great work of ensuring people have IDs. And a lot of it is relational, which you guys do a great job of. So I think it can border on organizing too. Um, and it's making sure that we are and making sure people have a voice who don't often get to use it. And I think there is a role in ensuring that, especially people who are incarcerated and especially children who can't speak for themselves, we must advocate on their behalf. But oftentimes there's still a power dynamic in direct service and in advocacy. And the goal of organizing is to kind of flip the power dynamic a little bit and make sure that we are listening to those directly affected and leading alongside of them, which I also believe is a part of our Christian faith. And as a minister and an organizer, I believe all three of these theories of change are incredibly important. We must have them all. But oftentimes the church shies away from the organizing piece, I think. And I believe, if half of our churches in the US did a little bit more organizing, we could see a lot more systemic change. So again, the goal of organizing is to get to the root causes, is to listen and ensure that people who are directly affected are the experts in any situation. So it's been referred to, we call it the cycle of organizing. So the first step in organizing is listening, and is listening to directly affected communities. So as an organization, we do not go into neighborhoods just to listen and find people. We always go connected to an institution because we believe relationships are the key to all organizing, which has made it really strange in a pandemic when we teach that relational face-to-face one-on organizing is the meat of it. So now it's been a huge change learning to do that on Zoom and through technology, but grateful for these systems. But listening is the first. So we go in based around our congregations. So for example, we held a listening session right before the pandemic hit in Ward 7. And we door knocked around that neighborhood. But because Edgewood Baptist Church invited us to do that in Ward 7 off Minnesota Avenue, we trained leaders and listened to the neighborhood and, door knocked and brought them together to hear some of the issues that they deeply cared about. And from that listening, we identify leaders that want to work on these campaigns. So instead of saying, great, now that we know that you have an issue with lighting and an issue with affordable housing, we're going to go and fix that. It is great. So what do you want to do about it? And how can we come together across wards to do something? And then after the listening and identifying leaders, it is ensuring that we're doing the research to make sure, if this campaign turns into something, for example, getting a stop sign on a corner, we need to understand, has there been a push for a stop sign before, or what are the costs of the stop sign? Who's in charge of it? Who's, it's usually DDOT, who's the head of that committee. So doing research, and then from that doing an action. And an action, we believe, means the person who can make the decision or who can make the change is in the room. This is a little bit different than activism, whereas, again, which we're noticing in the Black Lives Matter movement right now is incredibly important. Most of the times the target there or the person that is being moved is the media, which is an incredibly useful tool. But the actions in our type of organizing is ensuring that the director of transportation or Che, Mary Che, who's the head of transportation, would be in the room around the transportation decision and who could help change it. And after we have the action, we do evaluation. How did we do? How can we do better? Or we may have to go into action again and build more power if we don't win the first time, which is often the cycle of organizing, and then going back to listening. So it's a cycle that takes a long time. Organizing is slow work, but meaningful work. So I do want to share one story as I was reflecting around our budget campaign right now, is that we have, and there's a story that's one of my favorites about how we can be allies in this moment. And I think it has to do with how we use our power and how we use relationships. So a while back, there was a church called Beulah Baptist Church in Ward 7, is a member of WIN. And this issue that I shared a second ago was not fake. It was a stop sign. They had people, children who were getting hit by cars on their way to school. And it was a really dangerous place to cross in front of the church. There was no crosswalk or no stop sign. So they had fought for a couple years trying to advocate for a stop sign, and they weren't able to get it done. People said that we don't have funding for transit in Ward 7. There are much bigger issues. We don't need to work on that. And so, after they joined WIN, we began to have conversations with some of our other communities. And St. Columba's Episcopal came to us after they heard this story, and they said, interesting. It is, we actually have sidewalks being built all over Ward 3 right now. They have some potholes and our sidewalks aren't very pretty, so they're making them better. So our Ward 7 team at Beulah Baptist asked St. Columba, well, how can you pressure Ward 3 to stop that until ours are fixed? And so the Ward 3 church went and pushed for a moratorium on sidewalks, so it was not changed, or so they would not be continued development. They stood in front of bulldozers even, which was not always what we do, and demanded that the sidewalks were not finished until Ward 7 were built. And it worked because there were people across the city supporting one another and saying, we are often ignoring east of the river and communities east of the river. So we are going to use our power, not for, but to say that we're standing with them and we want to see this change happen. So that's a bit about the cycle of organizing and how we see it.
I think I love that example because it's kind of a microcosm for all of the other larger organizing that has to happen. And that example is, it's a stop sign for pedestrian safety. That's not gigantic, but it still takes multiple ward engagement just to get a stop sign done. So if folks are thinking, why engage this? Why is this important? When we're talking about issues much larger than a stop sign, like public housing, like affordable housing, like the use of public land, like good paying, blue collar, middle class jobs that can help people afford an insanely unaffordable city. That takes a lot of engagement, and people need to keep their heads in the game beyond just I pay attention when it blows up on national media. It's long-term work, and it has to come from hearing directly from our most affected groups and sticking back in and meeting with people over and over to make sure it's happening. Allison, I want to touch on one thing. There's in the description of the cycle, I hear there are multiple ways for people to be involved. There's research that happens. Research happens behind the scenes a lot of times, whether we're in pandemic mode virtually or not. That is something people can be doing from where they are. Relationship work happens by getting in the room with people as much as possible and talking with them. And that's a great role for extroverts, though introverts have it within them to be able to do that. And I am a living, breathing example. You can do it too. And then there's also, there can be a tendency for us to, not like WIN in general, but like anybody doing advocacy, organizing work, there can be a tendency to end up focusing on the campaign education, pass the law side, and then a little bit of a falling away on the implementation and rules and accountability side, which is also critical, but I think takes a really particular type of person to be able to engage that as well, to help keep people's feet to the fire in terms of like what they've agreed to. Even in the last few weeks, when the council passes a reform bill for MPD, but it's not implemented, there was a lot of advocating, agitation work to get that through the council. And now there's an accountability piece that needs to be followed through with. But the better organized we are going into these things, the better we will be able to actually bring the accountability piece on the back end as well. So Allison, I don't want to keep you too long because I told you 20 minutes, but I also don't want to sell us short here. So is there anything else that you want to tell us other than we definitely want to hit on the July 2nd action and making sure that our folks are getting registered? Let's start with like how's the registration going? Like how are the rest of our partners doing? What's our numbers look like?
Yeah. So our numbers, so we have a goal to hit 500 to 1,000 people is a broad goal to do this via Zoom. We have about 650 registered so far, which is great. I also don't fully trust registrations, meaning who, if everyone RSVPs, will they all show up? So
Right.
that's the big goal, is to ensure that people register and show up. But we're going strong, and we have a lot of congregations still pushing to meet theirs. And I was actually on a panel with Temple Sinai the other night, and the agitation that Rabbi Hannah gave was Addis Israel Synagogue up to their
Yeah.
numbers higher than ours. So are we
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
meet it? So it's a little fun, friendly competition going on with some of our congregations, so which is good.
Yes.
So
I well, I looked at our numbers. We last night we were right around 43. So we have Foundry. We have a goal of 100. So we are a little less than halfway there. We're gonna bug you about this all weekend and into next week leading up to it. We will send you all kinds of reminders, but you need to register. I would encourage you, if you live in a house with multiple adults, to each of you register on your own, just because otherwise I don't have a way to count you, and I want to make sure you are counted. But I also want to make sure that you know that this is one step. It is one faithful step that you can take in this moment to understand critical issues that we are working on as a community. But it is the first step into what will become a larger activity of organizing as we go into the fall through voter registration drives and through more relational meetings with the power that's being built in Ward 7 and in Ward 8, where we know that issues have been long unaddressed and create systemic and generational problems that must be addressed if we want to see justice present in this city. So please know that we are gonna bug you a lot. So if you register now, I'll stop bugging you. But we are not the NPR phone-a-thon, so I won't
and
make too many of those promises.
you don't get a prize for signing up, I guess.
No,
But I can share why the numbers matter if that's helpful.
please. Yeah,
So
yeah, please.
yeah, and would it be helpful to go a bit about what our budget asks are, or is that
You can literally do anything you want.
anything?
Okay.
So so I do want to say, I think just to start, and hopefully this is succinct, that the stop sign story that I shared, as Ben said, Pastor Ben said, is one small thing. Over the years, we have gotten hundreds of units built of affordable housing, of units of home ownership as well, which is something that we work really hard to do, and to increase equity in our organizations and in our neighborhoods. And we've also, as I mentioned, the transit. We were able to protect and preserve 13,000 jobs alongside the Amalgamated Transit Union. That worked. It took us about 4 to 5 years to be able to stop the privatization of that, even though the city was pushing to privatize, which would cut wages and cut benefits. And for the streetcar and circulator, who do have lower wages and benefits, who are privatized out to multinational companies, alongside our communities, including Foundry, again, we were able to get $10 an hour wage raises for people. So again, the 500 million dedicated every year toward LaMotta was a campaign that we worked with regionally. So we believe that when our economy is regional, the majority of our churches are a third, a third, and a third who live in Maryland, a third who live in DC, a third who live in Virginia. And we want to make it very clear that we need all of our partners together. And if you worship in DC, it is still your community. But we also can collectively use our power. So we wouldn't have won the WMATA funding from DC or Maryland or Virginia without our affiliates and without our regional work. So Montgomery County up to Baltimore, we have now a new organization starting in Prince George's County, also, and Voice in Northern Virginia, who's been doing really great work. And we actually partnered together around this to, again, use our people power to hold our elected officials accountable, that this was incredibly important. And I remember, the action that we had with Mayor Bowser a few years back when she said, look, I'm not opposed to putting money in the budget, but you've got to go to Virginia and you've got to go to Maryland. And we said we did, and we have. And we met with both governors there and were able to help push after a long campaign. So there are larger victories, and the region, and the way to get larger victories, and the way to really make greater impact and greater change is the more power we have. And we want to have this, again, this relational, accountable power, not dominant power, that we use to hold people accountable. And the more power that we have, the more we can change. And we use that power for good. And I believe God calls us to use our power for good. And that, I will never forget one of the first organizing campaigns I had when a woman said to me, and who lived in public housing in Ward 6, and she said, Allison, I am so sick of weak white allies. And she said, I need you to use your power, and I need our white people to use their power to challenge and put intention and to agitate that we've got to focus on communities like mine that are overlooked. And that has always stuck with me because I believe it is our calling, and it is part of our faith to be a part of building this holy power, to use it for good and to create, again, to bend that moral arc towards justice. So numbers matter because the more numbers that we show and that we have are connected and wanting to create the same type of change, the more our elected officials listen because they care about votes.
Yeah.
The 311 number, right? Everyone knows that when you call 311, they look up whether or not you're a registered voter. And most of our Ward 7 and 8 members have told us that a lot of times they don't get calls back. And so we encourage them to register, and it changes things, which is, to me, is really sad, right? It's wrong. Yeah. But we also care about voting. But we know that is a tool that we can use. And so that's why our numbers matter. And specifically for this July 2nd, I know I'm talking a lot now. July 2nd is really around this year's budget, which the final vote is on July 7th. So as Ben said, a lot
First
of
vote. First, and then they'll do a second round, but we need to get the changes in by the 7th. Yep.
Yes, changes in by the 7th. So that is, it's already been, horse trading these past couple of weeks with different things, but we really want to encourage council to do a series of different things. And we're asking for reinvestment in communities, mainly east of the river. So our platform, which you can see online you can go to our website and there's a banner that says, beloved DC budget. And we're really pushing around MPD, around the police budget to decrease it $100 million and put that $100 million into community safety and violence production, or violence interrupter, jobs, and also to fully fund the NEAR Act. So our Ward 7 and 8 pastors have really helped us see how important this is, that we want to push for real change, not just, we're not trying to just defund, because we think and recognize that police are an important part of our communities. But we need to change the way that they interact with our neighborhoods, especially east of the river. And that's going to take, again, long-term reform. But we're pushing there. We're pushing, again, led by Ward 7 pastors. The streetcar is $150 million, which will be going into Ward 7. And our pastors are calling it a gentrification project. You can go and see the stops that are planned for this streetcar, and there's, no lights. There's not really, it's not made for who's there. It's made for what is coming. And so we're pushing to see, during a pandemic and during this time, we want to see $150 million go into Benning Terrace, for example, public housing, where people have been living with rats and roaches and mold for years, and we can't find money in the budget to update it. So how can we use our funding in a way that shows that the lives of Black Washingtonians matter? And that's what our budget is about right now. And so it is the short work of the budget and the long work, is the longer work about this action on July 2nd is really coming together and creating a reimagined DC agenda. And we believe that all of our destinies are intertwined, and that, people who live in public housing want affordable housing, and also people who look like Pastor Ben and I want affordable housing. We both have toddlers. We both have, families that we want to be able to stay in this city. And, numerous people in our congregations who are seniors want to stay in this city, who've been connected to this city, people who are living 10 into a row home, right? That we're all connected, and that we all have similar self-interest in many ways and want to care for one another. So our goal is to listen and engage to 20,000 voters over the next year. And the start of that will be on July 2nd. And so we really do invite you to come and engage and to hear from pastors across the city and leaders across the city about how we can engage in this moment. And again, show that systemic reform takes people power. Education is important, and our book clubs are important. And we have to do them as people who, are white people especially. But they're not enough. We've got to be able to change systems as well. And so that is our goal. And we really hope to see as many people from Foundry engaged as well, so that we can continue this work together.
Excellent. And again, timing appropriate, because I know people are looking for what is the step I can take right now. And this is one of them. Right? People are not satisfied. So this is a step you can take so that we can work toward change together. Allison, thanks again. And Foundry folks, please go get registered. We will be, like I said, we'll be bugging you all the way through and after. But get registered so that we can be informed together, and so we can join with our neighbors in this fight for the long run. Allison, thanks again. We will see everybody else soon. See you
Great.
Sunday.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.